of you here this evening, but also to have Community Action House, Refresh, Hygiene, and Hope at First United Methodist Church, and Good Samaritan here for this community dialogue. This program is part of the museum's Cultural Lens series of exhibits and programs supported by Miller Knoll, Cornwall Health, the Michigan Arts and Culture Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. The goal of this series is to discuss topics that are important and pertinent to Holland today. It is part of the museum's mission to not only preserve our past, but to be a community gathering space where we consider and imagine Holland's present and future. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Your support and engagement makes our work possible, and we truly couldn't do it without you. So I'm going to pass the mic over, and I'm pleased to do that to Meagan MacCready. She has a strong history in serving alongside organizations who are committed to meeting immediate needs and supporting unhoused neighbors. She was previously on staff at Community Action House, working in partnership with Good Samaritan, and also on the team at Lakeshore Nonprofit Alliance. She is a current volunteer and steering committee member at Refresh and Hygiene Hope program, which you'll learn more about later. So we really appreciate all of our panelists who Meagan will introduce, as well as Meagan being here to conduct this dialogue this evening. So Meagan.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Wow, it is fantastic to be here today and to see all of you here in these seats giving up time and leaning in to some really important, we think it's important, obviously you think it's important, dialogue about what's happening in our community and how we can all be engaged in that. But before we dive into the panel, I just want to say that we are deeply grateful to the leaders that have agreed to represent their agencies on this panel today, and for you all. We already said that, but we're really grateful that you're here today and that you're committed to this. We also want to make sure to note that the panel that we have here today, it features only a selection of our local experts. They're going to offer valuable insights and their perspectives on this important issue, but there are many, many individuals and organizations who are working locally to support people who are living unsheltered in our community. We want to recognize and honor the many different approaches to working to solve this, because we believe that a variety of different approaches are needed. And we also just want to say, if you have questions or you want to learn about other organizations or these organizations, you can visit our resource table. Kate, give me a wave. Kate from the Holland Museum, right on the other side of that glass, is the table where you can connect with resources and learn more about what these organizations are doing. And we invited all of the organizations who are investing in this space to serve our unhoused neighbors to drop off resources. So if they took us up on that invite, you'll find that information there on that table. I also just want to take a minute to share briefly about this Cultural Lens series. I don't know, has anybody been to this before? I'm getting a little reverb on this. Have people been to these Cultural Lens series before? Give me a show of hands. Only a few, maybe? Or we're feeling shy? Okay, great. We're going to get into it. So this Cultural Lens series is an ongoing series of talks, performances, programs, and panel discussions like we're going to have today to support the mission of the Holland Museum to preserve our past and imagine our future. The Holland Museum has a really unique platform to engage nonprofits, like we're here today, community members, businesses, schools, and universities in partnership so that we can bring awareness and meaningful conversation, that's what we're going to have today, in our community to you. This is in alignment with the institutional value of inclusion that the Holland Museum holds. This ideal value says, we welcome everyone and their stories at the Holland Museum. Who can help me figure out what's going on with this? Oh, I shouldn't be holding this. Well done, well done. You handed it to me, Michelle, so I was like, okay, I shouldn't be holding this. Amazing, amazing. So, to wrap this up, I want to say, if you find this panel engaging, and I promise that you will, make sure you stay engaged in the Cultural Lens series, and really importantly, make sure you think of ways that you can support our friends at the Holland Museum. There is a QR code where you can scan and donate. There's a little clear box full of not enough dollars in there. So get behind them and support this work because it matters a lot. That's why we're all here today. So keep that in mind. So thanks for joining us here today. As Michelle said, I have had the opportunity to engage in the community. People paid me at one time to work alongside folks who are experiencing homelessness. But now I am a volunteer. I'll never say just a volunteer, but I am a volunteer and a neighbor in the community, just like a lot of you who are here in this room. And one of the ways that I stay activated and engaged is by leading in discussions and volunteering. So you're going to hear today about lots of different ways that you can engage. You're going to have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the complex issues, and you're going to get to know some of the incredible individuals who are part of working on this and walking alongside all of our unhoused neighbors. So are you excited for tonight? Yeah, I thought so. Fantastic. So Michelle said I was going to introduce people, but actually I want to start hearing from our panelists right away. So let's do a quick fire, but slow enough so they can understand you. Name, role of your organization, and of course the name of your organization. Let's start right here.
Hi, my name is Christina Ford. Welcome to the hottest ticket in town tonight. Glad you're here. I am the director of the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, which is also known, and you'll hear me refer to it as the Ottawa County COC, which is the continuum of care, and that's tasked with ending homelessness for all of Ottawa County. However, I am housed at Good Samaritan Ministries, which I will toss to Brenna. This is where she works.
Hi, I'm Brenna Zawacki. I'm the Director of Housing Programs at Good Samaritan.
Hi, I'm Jessica Presley. I'm the Senior Manager of Housing Access with Community Action House.
I'm Luann Stanley Hook. I am one of the clergy team that is over at Holland First United Methodist Church, and also oversee the Refresh, Hygiene, and Hope program from the church standalone.
Fantastic. Thank you, panelists. So, Christina, I would love for you to get us started today. Christina from the Lakeshore Housing Alliance. Can you help us come up with some simple definitions to some not so simple things that we're here to talk about today? Can you define homelessness for us and kind of talk about some of the individuals that might fall into these categories? And as you do that, I would encourage you to be thinking through, this is the lens that we ask you to use as we go throughout our discussion today.
Sure, absolutely. For purposes of our conversation tonight, I want to talk about really three types of homelessness, although maybe you'll think outside of these margins for other people that you know or places that you've served. The first one is Category 1 homelessness, and that's what we would call literal homelessness, and that is living somewhere that's not meant for human habitation. So you're thinking off the top of your head. It could be encampments, it could be in a park, it could be in a storage unit, it could be at the train station, it could be any number of places that are not meant for human habitation. So that's what I would call literally homeless. And then the second category is Category 2, and that is Category 2, and that's imminent risk of homelessness. And so in work that I've done prior to that, a lot of times we would put youth in that category as like maybe they're getting kicked out of their house, or people are thinking about where am I going to go because I've gotten an eviction notice, I can't pay my rent. So that at-risk piece of homelessness. And the other category is Category 4, and that's people who are fleeing possibly domestic violence. Maybe they have been trafficked. Maybe they're being kicked out of their house because of their sexual identity, and so that's a different category of homelessness. And so that's basically the four categories. HUD also has a definition of homelessness that we categorize chronic people in, and a chronic definition of homelessness, and I'll explain HUD if you're not familiar with housing terms. HUD is the Housing and Urban Development, and they are the ones who often give out monies from the federal government to help us end homelessness. So HUD's definition of chronic homelessness, which is a little bit different for some of our unsheltered friends, are people who are unsheltered. They maybe have it's coupled with a disability. They've had at least 3 episodes of homelessness in the last 4 years or more. That's kind of the brief definition, which is a lot to keep track of. So if you forget, it's okay. Come back.
And those terms are important because Christina, and you can elaborate on this if you want, because they often determine how we can serve, when we can serve,
Yes.
you know, from an org level. Of course, it doesn't impact necessarily how you can serve, how you can journey with people and support people, but it does create some barriers, which I know you're going to talk about later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what that is saying, all that means it comes down sometimes to the funding that we have for certain categories of people. And so we will talk about that more, but when you think about funding or funding streams or helping people not be evicted out of their house or the prevention piece of things, and we will talk about this more, that's why those definitions are homeless. And where we serve them is important because we want to make sure we're serving people who are fleeing domestic violence from places that are safe to them. We want to make sure that traffickers, for example, don't have access to people that they trafficked. That's really important. And in my previous life, I worked with some of those folks. So it's really important to make the distinction about those areas and how it's important that we fund different funding streams and look at those and how many people are in each of those categories as we do the work that we're doing.
That's great, thank you. So this next question is, we'd love to hear from all of the panelists. Can you get just a little bit more specific about your organization and the work that you're doing in our communities to address issues of housing, security, and homelessness?
Yeah, so I'll start with Good Samaritan. We are the HARA of Ottawa County, so the Housing Assessment Resource Agency. So we're the central point of intake for anybody experiencing a housing crisis in Ottawa County. That can be any of the categories that Christina just listed, from literal homelessness to imminent risk, or to an eviction prevention kind of situation. We provide rapid rehousing services, so we're one of the access points along with the shelter, the outreach teams, where someone experiencing homelessness can go to for services. And we, at that point, would assess someone, get their background information, and screen them for assistance. We provide rapid rehousing services. We have a housing search navigator who assists with looking for openings in the area, assisting with application fill-outs, and different processes like that. And then we would assist with the security deposit, rental assistance, case management, and ongoing support. We also do permanent supportive housing, eviction prevention assistance, and shelter diversion.
Wow.
A lot. So I'm with Community Action House, and a lot of people have probably heard of our food club and opportunity hub out on Paw Paw Drive. So we do a lot in the food space, but what I'm here for is our housing access department, and a lot of people might recognize that as our street outreach team. So the homeless street outreach team comprises of individuals that go out to try and search, find, and connect with people, and then get them connected to places like Good Sam, to refresh, to find out what those barriers are to homelessness. So they do a lot of out in the community work where they're trying to find people, find out what they need, and then get them to the proper places to help navigate that. So we take what we call a person-centered approach to homelessness, and we're gonna find somebody, figure out what they need, and then we're gonna walk alongside them until we can get them out. Because these are very complex issues. I mean, the definitions that she mentioned don't even include everyone, but they are very, very complex. And so our team of case managers go out and try to navigate those alongside people because it's a really, really scary thing to be outside. So having that team go out, and that's really where we focus in the housing, is that literal homelessness. So everybody living outdoors, storage units, sheds, campers without connections to anything. They're out there connecting with those people and trying to figure out how to get them into housing.
And I'm kind of the odd person out here working at a church. 6 years ago, actually this week, Community Action House and First United Methodist Church opened a program called Refresh, Hygiene, and Hope. And it was a vision that we had, the church and Community Action House, of a program that might remove some barriers that people living in homelessness had actually said, hey, this is a barrier to my finding stability. Community Action House had actually done some polling around that and found that having the ability to take a shower, just a basic being able to be clean, have clean clothes, and a place to have an address. What do you do if you have to apply for a job and you don't have an ID because you don't have an address to get an ID with? Those types of things, and also a place to connect to services. Those are the four main things that Refresh wanted to do in an atmosphere of removing barriers to stability and then instilling dignity. So some of the folks that were polled were saying, I might go someplace for services, but I might feel really bad when I'm there, and why would anyone want to go there? So we envisioned a place where somebody would feel good walking in the door, would feel dignity, and then would be able to receive those things that hopefully would remove those barriers. So just literally this week, we would have opened our doors on a Tuesday morning. It was a snow day, and so we didn't open our doors. We opened it, so it would have been next week, 6 years ago.
And then finally, what do I do? I'm kind of the broad brush of the whole group, and some of the things that the Lakeshore Housing Alliance does within that continuum of care is my first task, and I've been on the job 5 months, and kind of running a sprint in a marathon pace, I'll flip that around. Running a sprint the whole time, trying to get this marathon done, is writing the HUD grant, which is the Housing and Urban Development Grant, which brings in monies into the counties, and that this year is about $1.7 million. So we do that. The other thing that we do is we do events that HUD wants us to do that would enable them to count people who are homeless. And so for us, one of those events happened this last month, and it's called the point in time count, or the PIT count. You'll hear it called a lot. And what that does is it's a snapshot of housing and unsheltered and sheltered on a given night, usually the last Wednesday, Thursday in January, that last week in January. And so we take a count of all peoples, and that is done by all of our agency partners, which is why these folks up here are so important to the work that we do. And then the other thing that is a major thing, there are many things that we do, but another major thing that we do is we assemble and bring all of our partners together who are part of the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, and we look at gaps and gap analysis in our system and say, where are people not being served? What are the barriers that people face? How can we help remove those barriers? And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's been a lot of what we've been doing.
Great. Thanks so much. So it's amazing. And as we said when we kicked off the panel, this is just some of the organizations that are involved in supporting neighbors who are having housing challenges, whether those are chronic and long-term challenges, or there's some situational homelessness that people are experiencing right now. Are there any other organizations in the room that are engaged in supporting people who are unsheltered, providing spaces for them, providing resources? Yeah. What organization do you represent?
My name is Meagan MacCready. I'm the executive director of Unhoused Ministry. We serve women and
Thanks, Kim. Love it. I see a couple other people. Anybody else want to be brave? Yeah. Awesome. Does anybody hang out in the library? You will see a lot of our neighbors and our friends hanging out in the library, and they have worked to create an incredible space where all are welcome. So I'm so grateful for them. So I bet you, Natalie and Kim, who are in the back, would be happy also to talk about what they're working on and ways you can connect with them and build deeper relationships if you want to talk to them, just like with the panelists here today. So let's talk a little bit more about a housing first model. And you do not have to know what this means, because we are going to tell you what it means. We're going to work to define that. Greta, can you help us define housing first? And then we'd love to hear from some panelists about kind of why this method is really important and why we've really adopted it, why our funders, so like the Housing Urban Development and Michigan State Housing Development Authority, that's a mouthful, MSHDA, why they also have adopted it, which is important. Why do we have adopted it?
So Housing First is a model that's rooted in the belief that everybody is housing ready, for lack of a better word. So we don't put conditions on people to access housing. We don't require them to come to us sober, to come to us with stable income, or any kind of prerequisite, any kind of class, tenancy class or something. People are housing ready as they are. It's a basic need. So we approach housing as the platform to build off of, and so individuals need to be housed in order to work on those other things. That's the first step. So the two most important principles of Housing First are, of course, immediate access. So we should be rapidly rehousing individuals in homelessness. At Good Samaritan, our goal is to rehouse anybody that's in homelessness within 30 days or less, with no conditions. The second part is client choice. So everybody should have a choice of where they would like to live. We might have an idea of what that looks like, but ultimately they are the experts of their own lives, and they know what housing choice suits them the best. Whether that means being by the bus route so they can get to work if they don't have transportation, or being close to their children's school. We know that exercising their right is to choice, exercising their choice to finding their own housing. Of course, we'll support them with housing sort of navigation if they'd like, but ultimately where they land is up to them, and that will lead to a higher likelihood of housing stability long term. So that's kind of a short little description of Housing First.
That's great, thanks.
And to kind of build off that, how we incorporate that a lot of times into the work that we do is we recognize, especially for our people living outside, that HUD-1 definition, it is really hard to do that, right? Has anyone heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yep. The base level says that all of us need to eat, we need to sleep, we need water, we need to breathe, and we need shelter, as some of our clothing is another one. If we're not meeting that base level, the ability to achieve those next levels, to find jobs, to be that what we would consider a contributing member of society becomes that much more difficult. So taking this Housing First model when we're working with people experiencing homelessness coming into the Refresh program is, can we meet these basic needs right here, right now? What does that look like? Assess for what they are, and get people into housing as quick as possible. We want everyone to be able to achieve what they can achieve in their time, but we're gonna try and do that as quick as possible. The quicker we can meet those needs, the quicker we can get someone into housing, the longer term stability. There's data that shows that the sooner you get somebody in that, the shorter time they spend outside, the better chances they have of being stable and continuing that stability. So we really try to incorporate that into, let's find out what you need, let's meet those basic needs, whether that's a shower, whether that's food. I don't know about anybody else. If I sleep bad and I'm hungry, like I'm a terrible person to be around, and I recognize I have the privilege of going home and doing that. So for our neighbors outside, they don't have that. So what can we do in the meantime till we can get them into housing and help them achieve those next steps?
That's great. Thanks, panelists. So we wanted to start by providing you a little bit of context. Who's doing what? How are they doing it? What's some of the terminology or the models that they're leaning into right now to work to solve for this puzzle, to meet immediate needs, to support people where they are, but of course to help them stabilize and achieve the things that we all want to achieve. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we have a place where we belong and we can just count on and go to when we need it. So thanks for sharing more about that, panelists. So we're throwing a lot of information at you. We're going to take a breath. We're going to have like 10 seconds of no information and just let this kind of soak in, because it's a lot of stuff, right? The panelists and maybe even some of you in the room have learned about this a lot over the years, but we still have a lot to learn, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about a little bit more about some of the challenges. How many of you have been to a discussion, a community event, something that somebody was hosting that was focused on unhoused neighbors or homelessness? Raise your hand. Yeah, a lot of people, right? So, you have heard about these challenges. We know that. you are likely aware of some of the barriers that exist and maybe even about some of the local landscape here in our community, in Holland, and beyond. But we are going to spend a little bit of time hearing from these panelists about what they think the challenges are and why it's important to hear about the challenges from folks like our panelists and from local experts is proximity. They are close to these challenges and to the friends and the neighbors that are experiencing them every day. They are journeying with them. And so we want to hear a little bit about what it's like and what it's actually, the reality kind of doing this work and supporting folks in these situations. So we'd love to hear from all of the panelists. So it looks like Luann, you're going to tee us off. What do you wish, Luann, that everyone knew about homelessness?
Honestly, I wish that everyone knew that life happens to all of us. And who's heard the phrase, "There but for the grace of God go I"? Something about that sticks in my craw as a member of the clergy. I think God's grace is for everyone. I really believe that. So what I have started saying and what I really wish that everyone knew is that there but for the good support network that I had, go I. That's what I really want us to think about when we're thinking about the difference between someone who's ended up unhoused and someone who's not unhoused right now. What the support network looks like is huge. So you're going to hear about some of the challenges, and as you hear, I mean, honestly, I have a long list. Jessica and I are going to go through them in a minute. As you think about those, if you could just tick through in your head any ones that you've experienced and how you got through it, if you got through it without becoming homeless, and maybe some folks here have experienced homelessness. I know some have. What could have helped? You know, what were the support networks that we're missing? And that's what we need to solve for.
I think for me, what I want everyone to take away is when we're going to talk about some of these challenges, just thinking of how hard it is for people to exit. We're going to share, we had a long list and we really tried to narrow that down, and we will do our best, but it is so challenging for people right now to exit homelessness for a lot of reasons. The big thing I really want people to take away is that at the end of the day, these are still our neighbors. These are human beings, and they're outside, and they're really one of the most difficult times in their life that they're ever going to experience. So when you're crossing paths with them, you're learning more about people, you're understanding. I mean, just being here right now is huge to get that knowledge out there. But at the end of the day, these are human beings. And you know, I think I mentioned it already, but they deserve our respect and they deserve our understanding. And at the end of the day, we want our community to be the best that it can. So how can we do that for all members of our community, especially the ones that need us there the most?
You stole mine, Jessica. I know. No, I do. I really wish I did direct case management in home with people who have exited homelessness for 3 years. And what I wish that people knew is how easy it is to happen to you and then how hard it is to get out. And people really do try. I think that there's a lot of observation maybe of people at Refresh, kind of at the library in these situations, and they might appear as if they're just hanging out. They're really waiting. They're waiting on wait lists. They're waiting for us to process their cases. They're waiting for their documents to come in. They're waiting to hear more. And so I think just keeping that in mind too is there's so many processes, and we try to meet people where they're at. At the end of the day, we all have physical offices all over the place. These people likely don't have transportation. They're trying to get around, get to all of us, apply for our programs, all day long. It's taxing on the mind and the body and the soul, like all of the things that they really have to go through, and even with children in tow too at times. So that's just, I think, just a reminder too, is when you're observing people out and about, just to know what they probably have on their plate, even if it looks like, well, they just don't have a job, they're homeless. They really, they do. They have a job. It's filling out paperwork all day long and applications and having hope that they can somehow find safe, suitable housing.
So, when I was interviewing people a while back about this issue, there were 4 themes that came up that I wanted to pay attention to, and one of them is often the prevalence of adverse childhood experiencers or ACEs. Many of you are nodding your heads, and those can be many different things. A parent dies, a parent goes to jail. You had food insecurity. You lost your housing. You had abuse in your home. You had substance abuse in your home. Any number of those things, and can add up and cause you to feel insecure or contribute to that. So that's one of the things that came out during some of those interviews. The second one was just an increased medical fragility and risk of death, that people who are homeless and for long periods of time especially are more at risk, and often even just appear older than they are and have so many challenges around that, because you think about trying to get well when you're sick and you're stuck outside. I mean, that's just a horrible feeling. Thirdly, a high-risk substance abuse is a cause and a consequence. And so there's two things being true at the same time. Did one cause the other? Did this one contribute to this? Often both are going on at the same time, so we call that co-occurring. And those are sometimes and often related to people's mental health. And then fourth, the need for suitable housing and additional services. That often housing is great, and we want to make sure that people feel supported. And I'm going to quote somebody. A lot of my stint in homelessness was done in Minnesota. So because we live in Ottawa County, because we often know people or are connected to people, I want to use scenarios from there so that you don't know who I'm talking about. But I was in youth homelessness prior to this, and the youth said to me, and I'll never forget, and she said, you will never understand what it's like not to have anywhere to go, nobody to call, nowhere to go. You'll never understand that. I would say most of us in this room have somebody we could call or are connected to people. And when Sky said that to me, it stopped me in my tracks. And I thought about that, because she fit all the criteria that I just shared with you. So that's what I want to carry with me and have us carry with us when we talk about homelessness.
Thank you for sharing. Don't give it back to me when literally I can't hold it. Really valuable insights. So I think we're going to hear from Jessica and Luann, partners who work really close together through Refresh and through Community Action House. What would you say are the primary challenges that our unhoused neighbors, these are our friends that we see all around us, face to finding a pathway out of what they're experiencing when they're experiencing homelessness?
Well, Christina named a couple. Having the substance use disorder, which again could have been caused by being homeless or could have happened before and been a cause of homelessness. And certainly some mental health challenges. Some of those make it hard to track what you need to do next. A lot of folks that, all of these things I'm naming, I know folks at Refresh that have experienced these challenges. I've met folks before. Having trauma in your past, some of that would be childhood trauma maybe, but some of it could have just, happened as an adult, including grief and loss, and that turning into like a real trauma event causing a downward slide. That lack of support networks that I talked about and that Christina just highlighted with Sky. Having some type of disability, maybe undiagnosed, or possibly diagnosed but not fully supported in some way, especially cognitive. Having a pet. If you have a pet, you can't even hardly get a hotel room, much less go and find some of the services that are available, because pets just aren't allowed in a lot of places. So giving up your pet or getting out of homelessness, that's a really tough one when that's your last family member. Having a felony in your past, even in a long ago past, keeps you from being able to get a lot of jobs. Even rental applications will just outright reject you with a felony. Having had an event or a series of events, usually that led to an eviction, it doesn't matter what the reason was, it doesn't matter that none of it was your fault. If you had an eviction before, then when you apply for a new lease, that's going to keep you from getting on that lease. Aging out of foster care is another one where there's, thank God for Grant Me Hope. That's a new place in town that is providing some shelter for folks aging out. But for so many years, decades, we haven't really had support for that population, and they're kind of left to their own devices, and a lot of folks end up on the street. Having an inconsistent employment history, you know, you have those long blips. Some of us, you know, I had a long blip of years when I was a stay-at-home mom, but maybe that's seen as more legitimate than I was living in my car and I couldn't hold down a job very well. Can you imagine living someplace outside or in a car or in a storage unit and trying to hold down a job? So inconsistent job history, which then hurts your job chances going forward. Housing costs. What's going on with housing costs right now, rental particularly. If you haven't looked up the price of rentals, just look on, you know, housing.com or whatever, some of those rental places, and just see, pretend like you're looking for an apartment for your family, see what you're gonna have to pay. I think it'll shock you. The backlog system, you know, like Brianna was saying, you know, there's a lot of wait lists, there's a lot of time that it takes, even to get into like recovery services. That holds someone back if they're finally ready and then they can't get in anywhere. Just the lack of housing in general in this area right now that meets the federal criteria. You know, getting people, it's wonderful to say within 30 days people are going to get into housing. What is the housing they're going to get into in this area? That there's nothing right now, and I'll just say almost nothing. There's very, very few. If somebody's ready for housing, there's not a place for them to go. There's not a place that meets the federal criteria, and thus they're kind of waiting, and then in the meantime, people are still becoming homeless back here because of all the things that are happening with our economy. Do you want to add to that?
That should cover most of it. No, I think we're just adding to highlight that pathway out. It's really challenging right now for the affordability. And as we know, the more unaffordable it becomes for people to live in an area, the higher there is increased risk of homelessness and homelessness in general. We are seeing rents around for a single bedroom of $1,200. In order to even apply for some of these, you have to make 3 times that. You have application fees. We're seeing a lot more holding fees. So that's making these exit ramps out of homelessness, is like what we call them, these pathways out, really challenging for people. If you're trying to get out, there's not a lot of ways out of it for you. So in the meantime, what are we trying to do? We're trying to keep people as stable as we can while they're living outdoors. We talked about that hierarchy of need again. How hard is it to constantly be sitting in that state of crisis, constantly wondering where you're going to eat, constantly wondering, am I going to eat today? Where am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to get kicked out? Where am I going to go to the bathroom? That's a privilege some of us don't have to worry about, right? So now you're trying to maintain this level of stability to function, to find a job, to make these searches, to wait for that bed to open. And there's so few options. We need more options in our community. We need to explore that, what could that look like, and some solutions to figuring that out, because that exit ramp out, that quick way out, is what's going to help our community get people out of it. And in the meantime, those challenges that Luann listed, and she listed, that's not even everything, it is a lot, but there are so many more, and a lot of times people have multiple. So unless we have pathways out, and the more people are coming in, we're going to just see this need for people keep going up and up and up. We have to find ways to navigate that pathway.
That's good. Anything from the other panelists? No? Good. Okay. So we said we were going to talk about the challenges. Those are the challenges. Raise your hand if you've heard about some of these challenges before. Yes. But we can't have a panel where we're talking about we're not naming that, and we're saying this is still some of the things that we're up against in our community, and these are all still the things that we can play an active role in. And then the panelists are talking about the things that they are doing to help engage and lean into these, but there are pathways for you to play an active role in supporting these organizations and supporting our neighbors. So let's get into the fun stuff. Let's start talking a little bit more about some of the innovative solutions that you and your organizations are working on, and that even the community can join you in in supporting. So this is a big one, you guys, ready? This is a doozy. Maybe the toughest one. What will it take to end homelessness in the Holland community? Who wants to go first?
I can start. I'm going to narrow it down to one thing, and that is we need to be more preventative instead of being responsive. So through COVID, we received a lot more funding for eviction prevention services, and at Good Samaritan too, we received a pilot grant for a shelter diversion program, and so we've been working a lot with those that are at imminent risk of losing their housing, and I think that people would be really surprised by the volume of people that are at risk of homelessness in Ottawa County. So for reference, in 2023, Good Samaritan received 3,366 calls of people that were contacting us for assistance because they were at risk of losing their housing. Last year alone, we screened 1,215 individuals for our eviction prevention program, and since we launched our shelter diversion program two years ago, we diverted 405 individuals in 163 households from going into the shelter or going into unsheltered homelessness. So those programs that are in place right now, I mean, the unhoused problem is huge, but those preventative programs, and we're not the only ones, DHHS, Salvation Army, they also have programs like that. Those are really the dam holding up a massive volume really coming into our community, overrunning our shelter and all of our programs. So we need preventative programs, but we also need in the community, if you're in churches or schools, those kinds of things, if you're involved in those organizations and you hear of a household or an individual at risk, intervene however you might be able to in that moment, in any capacity that you might be able to do so. It's so much easier to prevent a housing crisis and homelessness than it is to get someone rehoused after they go into homelessness. So preventative measures in all capacities, that's what I would say. But I do believe it's possible, and very hopeful it's possible.
That's great, Brenna. Before anyone else, that is such an incredible point, right? Someone shares that they're dealing with some financial constraints. The budget is really tight this month. What would it be like for someone that you have a safe and trusted relationship to say, do you feel like your housing is at risk? Or what would it take for you to just stabilize for this month? What can your community of support, your friends and your neighbors do to wrap around you to provide that little bit extra so you can stay, right? We can all probably find ways to help people stay put. That's great. Thanks, Brenna. I think it's Christina.
Brenna really did say a lot of what I was going to say. I think the other thing that I wish I would see in our community is what I would call flex funding. And the reason for that is oftentimes we are trying to, and I am not a direct case manager. I'm looking at kind of the scope of what is needed, and often what I'm seeing is, and I did a lot of eligibility work prior to this, and I see lots of times people are in some sort of crisis, and especially like post-COVID, I just saw like there was this tsunami of need that was carried throughout a lot of communities. And so I think, and I would see people in the area that I was in, I would see people often who would need a month or two of rent just to get stabilized. Like maybe their spouse lost their job due to COVID, and so they were housed okay, but they needed those kind of preventative measures to help them stay housed. And I always think, and I go back to, I don't need to keep pulling at everybody's heartstrings, but I always think about children in all of this as well, in communities, because one of the things we say around my house sometimes is we say, kids didn't ask for this, and if you were a kid who went through a traumatizing time in your childhood, and I'm thinking of, especially like this week, I got a phone call about a specific family, and I can't give a lot of details, but when I think about this particular family, I think, how is this going to set this person up for life? And I often say also, I want to set you up to win, right? Don't we want people in our communities to rise and to win at life, no matter who they are or where they've come from. We want to make sure that we have some funding that allows for the flexibility to be able to maybe, hey, let's make a bridge with this landlord so that they will rent to this family, and let's make sure we stabilize this family and get them on their feet so that they can actually see their way out of poverty or of instability or of this, and take the pressure off a little bit. One of my challenges is that as I think of this is like when we let people get up to the cliff of, being unhoused or jumping off that cliff where they're going to be like being evicted. I mean, like, how frustrating, how scary. Think of that tonight, that in a week you would have to go, in a week that you might be unhoused, and then think of how you tried to solve for that. That's scary and challenging. And imagine you're a parent trying to navigate that and still provide a healthy environment for your kids, or as an individual, for a parent or someone else that you love. Really challenging. So that's one of the things I wish that we would address a little bit more in our community.
And so we all would love to see this preventative measures, right? I am a realist at times and recognize that we are in the midst of that crisis right now with so many people outside. So what it's going to take for us to end that is it's going to take a lot of work of people coming together, people like all of you sitting here, ready to sit and have those conversations, look at the systems, understand the systems, learn about them, and say, okay, we need those too, but we still have to worry about, we've got people outside. Last year, our team worked with 489 different people, and I like to say that number, not in a way of pointing out, but you didn't see 489 people experiencing homelessness, right? You probably saw a group of the same people. That's how many people are outside trying to make it. So we are in the midst of this challenge, and we're gonna have to really figure out how we're gonna come together and solve that while building up these systems so that people don't end up there. We wanna also find ways that once we get them housed, that's why we have an amazing group of case managers, that we keep them there so that this doesn't happen. But right now, we do have a lot of work ahead of us that we're gonna have to navigate.
That's great. That's great. So what I hear you saying, Jessica, is that we are all in this together, right? So in that spirit, how are organizations in our community, and I know you all are highly collaborative, but how are you working together to address these challenges that you've just named for us?
Yeah, I'll start and then get into well, one, sitting here, a lot of us know each other, right? We work regularly, we have a lot of good conversations, some crying conversations, we joke, but really trying to figure out what are all of us doing and how does that system work. So we recognize that for Community Action House, we have an area that we serve in the things that we do. Because Samaritan also does the Lakeshore Housing, everybody has a spot. What I think we need to do more of, and this is what we're working on, is bringing all of those groups together, looking at those and finding what are the true barriers to getting out. Those paths out of homelessness are how we keep people housed and get them out of homelessness, and we don't have great pathways right now. So a lot of organizations, what we're doing is bringing those systems together and trying to analyze. There's groups that are starting, and I'm sure you could share on some of those, that are going, okay, we're here, we're being met with this crisis. All of us, what are you doing? What can we do? What do we need to do that better? Where are we missing that? All of these pieces are going to be huge, and it's going to take all of these different organizations and places like My House Ministries back there and the library all contributing different ways, because it's not one organization that's going to solve this. It's too complex. All the issues you labeled of these causes, there's going to be a different way to help solve that for somebody. And if we don't collectively organize that and look at that and figure out how we do the system better, we're just going to be stuck in these cycles over and over and over, and having panels about homelessness over and over and over.
So specifically, one of the things that, I talked about the Refresh program, and that is what we've really tried to model that as is a partnership. And then we started as a partnership, and we want more partners. And so we've really tried to grow that through more partners, people that are willing to come to Refresh and table there, like the recovery support networks, Medicaid providers, the health department, community mental health. What are some of the services that people don't need to have to tromp around town to try and find that can just be at Refresh when people are there having a meal? One of the nice things is there, it takes a long time to get some people through the showers, and so we have a good meal 3 times a week, 2 mornings and 1 evening. And so while people are waiting, there's a lot of community, there's a lot of time, that people can talk to each other, or they can go find some information and get something done that maybe they don't have to go across town to do. So that's one of them. Our Wednesday night program, because it is dinner time, it's a full dinner, and dinner is a lot more labor intensive than breakfast. On Tuesdays and Fridays, so we have 4 different churches. Some of those folks are in the room that come once a month and just help us prepare dinner and serve it. It's a very big deal. It's a very good dinner, and it's something that helps create community and again belonging and fosters that sense that we're all in this together. Adding more services like. A lot of our neighbors that are unhoused have bikes as their primary transportation, if they're lucky enough to have something. And so bike repair is really needed. And so we have that, partners that come in and help us with bike repair. One of the other things is, as we're looking at the hierarchy of needs, the winter comes and we're aware of people that don't qualify for whatever programs are out there, who are going to be outside, who don't have those options for inside. So a team at the church just said, and it's all Refresh volunteers that said, that's not okay, we're just going to open the building, how can we do this? And so we have opened the church for warming. Last year, remember the big blizzard we had in January? It kind of really kicked it off. And so we were open for 5 days that winter, and this year we said, I think we can do better. And we started out in December, with a little bit higher temperature threshold, and then Lifeline Ministries was also trying to do this, so we are now collaborating with Lifeline, and because of that, we have been open. Tonight will be the 21st night this winter. That is a lot, friends. It's a lot to stay up all night, with multiple people staying up all night for 21 nights, and we're not done. Have you seen the weather next week? We're not done. So we need partners. We need people with skin in the game, and that's what I think. Putting your own money in a pot for your friend and helping them stay in their housing, putting your own warmth and your nice soft bed at home and leaving it and coming and staying at a church where other people get to sleep and you're awake. That's what it's going to take, because our solutions that we're dreaming about are long term. Now, what if we had to build something new, right? It's going to take forever. Really solving this is, I hope and pray next winter we're not the only church doing this, but we're probably going to still be in a situation where next winter we're going to need some of this, right? So collaboration is the key, and everybody being willing to do whatever they can. And maybe your part isn't staying overnight. Maybe it's providing funds, or maybe it's providing snacks for people or whatever, but there's something everyone can do.
That's great. Thanks, Luann. Yeah, agreed. I never promised to be an unbiased facilitator today, and if you saw me smiling as Luann was talking about the warming center, it's because I had volunteered overnight, and it's weird, and it's like I was tired, but it was also kind of amazing. So if you want to talk to me, I would be happy to share about what that experience is like, and you can give it a try if you are in a season of your life where you're able to take a nap or two and stay and hang out for all-nighters, different than all-nighters in your 20s. So I will say that. Thanks for sharing about that, panelists. So this is the fun part. This is the part where our panelists are going to share about ways that you, our community and our neighbors, can be activated to support them and to support this work right now. So how can they do this, panelists? What supports do you need? What are the solutions that they can get involved in?
So one of the exciting opportunities that's very collaborative, and I don't have a huge amount of action steps, but I would say stay tuned, because it's gonna get
Write
real.
this down. Write this down.
Right. And I'm actually going to read this off because a few weeks ago, like less than 3, there were some people who got together and said, like, no more. Like, we really need to work on solving this problem. We need to look at the gaps in our community. We're having lots of meetings in the community, but we need a path forward. There's some good traction, but we need a path forward. And you see them all nodding their heads because they were a part of a lot of these meetings. So, and what's exciting is that we've involved the Lakeshore Leadership Council, because one of the things, if you were to ask me, like, what's needed, is it's all hands on deck. And I referenced a lot, living in Minnesota, I was living in Rochester, Minnesota, home of Mayo Clinic. Some of you are nodding your heads, you've been there, you've known people who've gone there, and so we had some large challenges around that with people sleeping in places that weren't great options for them. And so our city got together and was solving for homelessness. And that's what I would say is needed, is we need our city officials, we need people, everybody in this room, we need all of our partners, we need all of our innovators and people who are able to help us create the system. And we're really doing this like we're building the plane while we're flying it, so to speak. It's a little scary. But what's exciting about that is we're proud to announce the launch of Project Home. And it's a collaborative action plan aimed at addressing homelessness in the greater Holland Zeeland area. It's an initiative that brings together key service providers, stakeholders, and community members to identify and implement both short-term and long-term solutions. We have a shared vision, and that is a welcoming, thriving community where any form of homelessness is rare, safe, short, and unrepeated. Our goal is to provide varied, abundant, and truly affordable housing options, build a clear understanding of the system, and achieve broader, more effective education and advocacy. Now, there are some key objectives, but what's happened in the last few weeks is we have hired a project manager, and I think she's actually in the room. Is Hardy Khan here, or is she hiding on me again? Hardy and I are best friends right now because hi Hardy, she's our project manager, and so we have worked with her and with a working group of people who are a part of the Alliance. We have an advisory group in the Lakeshore Leadership Council, so a piece of those. We've met with some of the downtown development people. And
Christina, who are some of the people, like to name, probably the Lakeshore Leadership Council isn't something that most folks are familiar with. Who's kind of at some of those tables?
Yes, so actually I don't even know all of them because we meet tomorrow actually, and so you're getting kind of the scoop. First, don't tell them all. But part of those people are, actually you probably know more than I do. Tracy Bolo, who is part of the LNA.
So we Travis, nonprofit leaders,
yes.
Right? Local businesses, local philanthropists, people that have invested a lot in our community over the years.
Yes, as well as then all of our partners who are a part of serving homelessness in the downtown or in the Holland Zeeland area. And those would be people who touch the housing world or who are service providers. And so we are going to be looking at these, having some working groups, looking at gaps. We did 107 surveys during the pit count night, which was an additional survey, and gave out an incentive to people to find out what are their barriers for housing. So that's just one of the preliminary things. So this is a very fast process. We are very engaged in it. It is very consuming. And we will be putting out more details, but it involves both like the business community and people who are like the mayor, and then it also involves our providers on this side of that side of the aisle as well. So, and again, forgive me because it's new and fun.
It's new. It's new.
Innovative.
Things are happening. Innovation. Yeah.
So another thing too is to advocate. So, of course, donate your time and volunteer and those things too, but advocate for policies that will actually make a difference. Policies that promote affordable housing, that protect the rights of those that are unhoused. Right now in the Senate, there was a bill that was proposed. It's the Fair Chance to Access Housing, I believe is the title. And that's just one policy. It's to prevent landlords from denying tenants just for solely having a criminal background. It'll limit to certain convictions and certain time frames. And so things like that, different policies on a local level, go to your meetings with the city, with the county. It's easy to email your representatives or to call them. There's websites that draft emails for you now. You personalize it a little bit. So those kinds of things. Do things that will actually make an impact in a tangible way. And then, yeah, I mean, my director of finance is here and she'd be really upset if I didn't say donate your money. But yeah, but yes, those are some ideas I have.
Well, they took all the good ones. So, really, I think the advocating piece is so huge. The fact that, again, you guys are here already wanting to learn about homelessness is a step forward. Start talking about it with people in your lives. Start looking for people who are experiencing it. Get to know them. Even if you don't want to donate money, which will also take that too, right? Or volunteer your time. That's a good place to even get to know. I've had the opportunity to get to know so many amazing people who are experiencing homelessness right now. It just, that piece alone makes it so much more in depth for me to understand, like, what do they really need? Like, the surveys were huge for us to really look at and go, what do you need? Not what I think you need. What do you, living outside right now, need? And then we're going to take those ideas and put them hopefully into solutions and really use this Project Home platform to guide what do our friends and our neighbors and our community members need just to move that forward. But if you want to start, we'll let you talk about the volunteer, but volunteer to come meet people. Go out and talk to them. Go to the community kitchen and say hello. Get to know people's stories. They'll tell you, and they're willing to open up. You know how lonely it is sometimes? I mean, just to be out there and feel stigmatized and cut off from people. Help them feel like they're a part of our community. So all of that stuff, but also get to know the people that are experiencing homelessness and get to know their stories.